This video, we're going to learn how to create the terrain model from the pond grading and also from the pond water element. So in the previous exercise, we created the pond grading and all the elements that we need for the pond. So now let's create the terrain model so that we can analyze the pond volume. So let's review our drawing here. In the 2D view over here, we have our linear features that were drawn and created from our template geometry. So we have our pond tie down feature, our pond berm, our pond freeboard feature, we have our pond bottom. All those were created from our linear template, and then we have our pond water element that all this was based on. And over here in the 3D model, we have our pond grading elements, our components, and our meshes, and our 3D features that were drawn as well. Now you also notice the blue shape here, that's from the pond water element. So I want to turn that off so we can see the other components underneath there. So I'm going to right click in my view here and select turn off by element, and I'm just going to select my pond water element so I can see my other components that were underneath there. And one other thing I want to point out is when we created the linear template, when it creates these 3D meshes and these components, it doesn't actually create a closed bottom shape here or any closed mesh in the bottom area here. So this is actually a hole. So when we go to create the terrain model, that will actually take care of that and fill that in. So let's talk about how we can create the pond terrain model now. So what we're going to do is we're going to be selecting the linear features over here, or the template geometry features that I drew that were drawn from the template. So to create the terrain model, I'm going to go up to terrain, and I'm going to use create from elements. And I want to set my feature definition to propose contours and triangles. And for the name, we're just going to call this pond grading. And it's going to prompt us to locate the elements to add. We're going to select our pond berm tie down feature. Then we're going to select our pond berm. We're going to select our freeboard element, and then we're going to select the bottom of the pond. So those are the elements that are going to make up our grading of our pond. And then we're going to right click to accept. We're going to use a feature type of break line initially for all of these, but then we're going to come back and change the pond berm tie to be a boundary so we can clean up any extraneous triangles. Left click to accept, and that's going to create the terrain model in the 3D view over here. Now you'll notice there's some extraneous triangles here, triangulating across the backside. So we're going to clean that up by changing the feature definition to for this pond berm tie down point to be a boundary. So to do that, we'll go up to feature management, change feature type, and we want to make this be a boundary. So we're going to select this element, and we're going to right click to accept. We're going to set the feature type to boundary, so just use your up and down arrow keys on your keyboard to toggle between the different options. And we're going to left click to accept. And then if we refresh our 3D view here, you can see how that cleans up the terrain model there. Also note that the bottom of the pond is now closed in, and we have a mesh there as part of the terrain. Now that we have our terrain model for our pond, now we want to go and learn how to analyze the volume of our pond that we've created. So we can do that by using the terrain modeling tool called Analyze Volume. So if you go to the Terrain tab, go over to the Analysis area, and then select Analyze Volume. And we can use our Analyze Volume from Terrain Model to analyze the volume of our pond. So we have a couple methods here we can use. We can do a terrain model to terrain model volume, or we can do a terrain model to a plane. Well, in this particular case, we have a terrain model for our pond grading and our pond bottom, and we also know the plane elevation, which is 154. So for the method that we're going to use here, we're going to set this to terrain model to plane, since we already have the plane elevation of 154. So we're going to set that to terrain model to plane. We're going to locate our from terrain model. That's going to be our pond. So I'm just going to go over here and select our terrain model for our pond. And then our plane elevation, or our to plane, is going to be 154. Okay, so I'm going to key in 154, left click to accept that. We have our cut fill factors we can enter. We're just going to leave those set as default value of 1. And for our boundary, we don't have a boundary, so we're just going to right click to reset for none. And we want to save our results because we want to graphically display the results as text. and place it in our file here. So I'm going to left click to accept that. You're going to notice it attaches the text, the volume text to my cursor, and I can place it on the screen and I can review the results. You can see it's pretty easy to get the volume of your pond.